All right, good morning and welcome everybody to Turning the Key, episode 4, with myself, Patrick, and my co host, Sean.
Good
Every
morning.
week, we get into a different hexagram of the I Ching and the Gene Keys, and we see where the conversation takes us. So this week, we have the 43rd hexagram in the I Ching. A very exciting one for me personally in having a deep connection with this one myself in the Gene Keys, which is named Epiphany. And the shadow that we're exploring with this key is the shadow of deafness. The gift of this key is the gift of insight.
Hmm.
So deafness, insight, and epiphany. These are some of the words that you're going to hear us speaking today. And invite you all, if you're listening, to begin this journey, this episode, by starting to open yourself up to contemplating this concept of deafness and what deafness may mean to you in your life. And listen along. We'll have some invitations, some practices shared throughout the course of today's conversation. And welcome aboard. And good morning, Sean.
Good morning. Thanks for being here with us. This is a powerful hexagram for sure, 43. I'm going to jump right into the trigrams if that feels good.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is lake over heaven, and lake is a trigram that really represents like our peace and our joy, and not the joy that is like makes your heart beat, that creates a mania, or like the how we were as kids, like the day before Christmas or Hanukkah or your birthday, where you know you're getting gifts the next day and you can't even sleep because you're so giddy. This is the peace of like a still, calm lake, where you're standing on the edge of the lake and you feel the stillness all around you. And the lake surface is undisturbed, so it's a perfect reflection of the nature around it. And so when we get into this space of calm and peace and joy, that's a lake. And there's also a sense of safety with the lake because it's fresh water, and so now we can drink. And it's also a space of nourishment because there's fish and other food in and around the lake. So it's a space of like quiet, calm, relaxation. And when you look at it, it's a yin line with two yang lines under it. But when it's placed on top of heaven or Qian, then those yang lines go all the way down. So now this is a lake in heaven. And so this is a lake that can represent a heavy laden cloud with water, and it's that time right when the rain is about to fall. So it's like a cloud burst. And so that's where this idea of breakthrough comes through. And this idea of insight, of where you've been laden with all these ideas, laden with all this data, and laden with all this information. Then all of a sudden, there's a breakthrough, and that cloud releases, and you get the literal download.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
that is, and without even starting to scratch the surface in the language of the Gene Keys, epiphany to me, that lightning bolt, that
Mhm.
spark, the light bulb moment, where that aha moment. And I love how you're saying, that moment right before the deluge, right before
Mhm.
the rain pours down, um, from the cloud. And I'm curious if there are some other points around the physiology when in the I Ching and this hexagram.
Yeah, this is another tidal hexagram. Again, this is paired with the pericardium going across like the organ clock, which is how the energy circulates through the day, through the year, through the season, through a life cycle. And so this is April, and this is the month represented by the dragon, and this is the that energy resonates with the stomach channel and the stomach organ. And so the stomach, that hunger of where you have all, like, imagine and seeing this like smorgasbord, right? This buffet of all this different food, all on a table, and you're starving. What do you eat? You know?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so the idea is that some of the breakthrough or resolution is when you fall upon what you're truly hungry for. Because if you just
Hmm.
stuffed your face with everything, actually that would turn into a very uncomfortable situation. But if you can see all these different options around you, but then hone in on really what you're hungry for,
Hmm.
and that in and of itself is this ability to stay tuned to your body, because you might be hungry for something that is really nourishing, and the colors and the smells and the way that the food is presented will attract you to that. But if you're deaf to what you really need, you might just jump into everything and actually eat the
Exactly.
things that aren't good for you. So the connection to the stomach here is really important, in my opinion, because of all the options of life. When that cloud is becoming super laden with water, you can become deaf to really what you need, want, and what is your heart's
Hmm.
truth. And if you don't allow that kind of epiphany to come through and then stay strong to it, and there's the energy of will, of your energy to actually push through and stay true to your truth, to move uphill, so to speak, is connected into this space and around your hunger in life and what you want to bring into your sphere, what you want to bring into your body, what you want to put into your mouth.
Hmm.
Like there has to be this ability to be resolute and to take away from all this abundance and separate it, and that's part of the original ideograph, is a hand is separating or parting something,
Mm.
and so it's like taking that part of life that you're truly hungry for and taking that in,
Mm. Hmm.
whether it's from the information around you or the food that you want to eat, the community that you want to be in. There's
Hmm.
all these options. But when you stay true to your heart and you stay true to your own epiphany about what is right for you, then that's the nourishing part.
Yeah.
But when there's so much noise, so many options, that's the deafness. So it's not a deafness that you can't hear anything. The deafness comes from hearing everything at once.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I
It's
mean?
so, it's so key and so spot on. And for anybody listening who was with us 2 weeks ago, we had an off week last week. We were talking about the 23rd hexagram, the key of quintessence and the
Mm-hmm.
shadow of complexity. And so this key, the 43rd key, is paired with that. And and what that means is that you may find an inner relationship between the shadows and how they can perpetuate one another, and the gifts also and how they can perpetuate one another. What we mean by that, and so Sean, when you're talking about, just this expansive selection of kind of overwhelming options that just create this noise, there's that shadow of complexity, like too many
Right.
different options. And then if you are deaf to your internal state of how to navigate and orient yourself in that sea of that mess, it just creates a link and a pattern for the opposite of breakthrough, breakdown, to
Yeah.
be overwhelmed by this deluge of this mess in your life, in the world, in your relationships, in your finances, all of the things. And so what I've found in my own relationship with this journey is how can I, and in the gene keys, the physiology is related to the inner ear. And so it really is that
Mm.
that ability of how well are you able to get quiet and listen internally to the state of what's happening inside of you, and what that inner voice is telling you. I would say, you like you show up to that table, and it's like, where do you allow all of the sensory input in this metaphor? And that table can be the options that you have before you about how you take steps forward in your life for business opportunities, or what you do in your relationships, or how you spend your money or deal with your finances. Consider that all of these things to deal with, all of these things that are presented upon the table for you in life, and how do you select that precise, that simple, that quintessent step forward in the best space of alignment for yourself. And if you're too removed from your inner compass and the opening of your inner ear to be able to listen into where is this, what feels really true and feels really right for me, and how I take my best step forward, that's where this overwhelm can come
Yeah,
through. And
exactly.
you can be totally just drowned by the overwhelm of that mess, in that noise that
Hmm.
drowns out and amplifies that deafness from your center, from your inner space.
Really, yeah, exactly. And this deafness is connected into that overwhelm of what we spoke to, last week, of like there's like that pile of things that are top heavy, and you're feeling that wobble, and where you don't really have your root, you don't have your legs, and you're just getting pulled forward in life.
Mm-hmm.
Or where there's been accumulation of excess, you know what I mean? Whether it's in our closets, in our physical closets, in our homes, or in our emotional closets, like deep inside of our emotional past and trauma. And this pairing is really important between the stomach and the pericardium. And the stomach channel starts here under our eyes, and this is the plane of movement, is the transverse plane. So it's what allows us to twist and turn and to look and to be attracted to all this different abundance.
Mm.
And so this comes down, and the stomach channel then meets our nipples here, and that's where the pericardium channel starts and goes out to the hand, which what we were talking about last time. And this important point here, Laogam. But the stomach channel continues down and brings the energy down to our feet. So it's how to be in this sensory abundance of the world, where we're taking things in with our eyes, but also it makes us hungry. It makes our mouth open. And also how we're attracted, with our heart, with our bare heart, with our breasts, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so what are we hungry for? Like for our physical nourishment, but what are we hungry for our emotional nourishment?
Mm-hmm.
And this like allows us to look around and allows us to then ambulate, to use our legs to walk towards what we want or run away from what we don't want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's like how our no's actually define our yeses.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a world that if you don't tune into your inner yes, if you don't tune into your own ability to really listen to your heart's truth, then you become deaf. And then that's where compulsion can really come in,
Mm-hmm.
where you're just moving towards all this sparkly, glittery stuff, the things that kind of just look good, or the things that are just engineered to taste good, but not really nourish you. When you look into food science, like there's
Mm-hmm.
been a lot of science to come in to develop these products that actually just taste good, but don't actually fill you up. So you just keep eating, keep eating, keep
Yeah.
eating, keep eating. And again, this is like, the truth of nature isn't scarcity. We have it like built into this idea that you got to work hard, that there isn't enough, that you got to scrape through, you got to lift yourself up from your bootstraps. But the truth of it is that abundance is really if you go to any ecosystem, when things are thriving, things are abundant, even a
Mm-hmm.
superabundance.
Mm-hmm.
And so really to tune into the space of what you're truly hungry for is more about eliminating or separating or taking away, and really landing on the insight, really landing on the clarity, the quintessence, and
Mm-hmm.
again, and really trusting that epiphany.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the stomach itself, it fills up with all this food and then slowly just gives a little bit out at a time, a little bit out at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what your stomach is actually doing, is breaking down the food, cleaning it with the acid, and making it absorbable, and then giving it a little at a time to the small intestine,
Mm-hmm.
so that things can be absorbed and so that your body can be nourished.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's anything that's super uncomfortable is when you eat too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're so overfull that you can't think, you have to lay down, you feel sick. And so it's like when we are in this state of being stuffed,
Mm-hmm.
and that your ears are plugged and you're just like, you can't move, you can't even look. And, a lot of modern culture is like that. Get on Amazon. What are you going to buy? There's so much.
Yeah.
And like, that's just that really negotiating abundance is actually like a deeper truth than trying to hoard, for scarcity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting because when you look at the hexagram where you have one yin line
Hmm.
and then five yang lines under, if you know nothing about it, you can almost imagine like a vessel that has like is almost filled to the brim
Yep.
when you look at it, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting to speak into this just the concept of hunger, because
Yes.
when we think about breakthroughs and breakdowns, so for anybody listening, a big piece of the topic that we're talking about today is an archetype that has a lot to do with how we experience breakdown or how we experience breakthrough. And everybody wants a breakthrough in different forms. You know, I want my career breakthrough. I want this breakthrough in romance and intimacy. I want this breakthrough in this, big financial win, whatever it may be. And we hunger for those breakthroughs. So we
Hmm.
hunger for a breakthrough. And where does that take us out of our center, where we're going and trying to consume or activate any possible thing to try to give us that breakthrough with so much intensity and so much graspingness
Hmm.
that we've actually completely left our center and gotten quiet and listened into, hey, what is actually the simple step forward that I can take that can help position me for the breakthrough that I'm craving? And so
Yeah.
I love this key because it flips the script on breakthrough from breakthrough is something that I need to go and attain, or breakdown is something that I need to fight against as much as possible. And it brings the power back into your center and invites you into this exploration of how can I till the soil in my life and create the conditions for the breakthrough to just arrive at my front door.
Right.
It's like,
So
how can
beautiful.
I lay out the red carpet for God to arrive and bring me the
Mm.
gift that I've been praying for,
Yeah.
rather than going and shouting to high heavens and climbing the mountains saying, where are you? And so, building off of the themes that we spoke about last week with quintessence and a lot of talk about how do I clean space? How do I clean out the mess and the junk in my life? Epiphany pairs so well with it because it's how do I, in that process of cleaning out the mess and also in coming into with less external mess, how do I, and also internal mess, how do I amplify and expand my ability to be able to hear myself more clearly
Yeah.
with more stillness
Yeah.
and and what my inner compass is telling me in the best steps forward, and how do I prepare the garden here for that deluge, plant the
Hmm.
seeds and wait for the rain and the sun to come so that they can grow.
Yeah. That's so beautiful.
And that's where, and the
That's
sprouting
perfect.
of the insights from
Right.
that, right? Yeah.
And then how it happens naturally, like you can't get a plant to grow by going outside and tugging on it. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yeah.
It's like you just have to you bury the seed and you just trust that that seed is going to sprout and break through the soil and grow. And you can just only tend to the nourishing of the soil, but you
Mm-hmm.
can't actually pull on the plant and make it grow by your effort.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the idea of what everything that you talked about, especially about rolling out the red carpet for God, is so beautiful. And think about it that when you're outside, and actually there is this cloud burst, and you're just overwhelmed by an abundance of rain, and the deafness of the pouring rain, and how that must feel. And really, the only thing you can do is seek shelter. And once you seek shelter, you just have to sit out the storm. You know what I mean? And so when we're
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmed with all these options, all this abundance, all this complexity, like oftentimes it's like rather than running from one thing to another, to another thing, to another thing, being top heavy and being in your wobble of life, you really just need to sit in a space of shelter and protection and be quiet. And one thing that happens when you are sheltered in a rainstorm, that the sound of the rain on the, whatever it is above you, whether it's a tarp or a roof or whatever it may be, that creates this kind of theta inducing space where you get into this hypnotic space where you actually open more to these insights and these epiphanies and to the quintessence of what you need to do next. But that comes from a place of stillness. And oftentimes when our GI system, when our stomachs are overwhelmed by abundance, what we actually need to do is fast, right? We need to actually eliminate all the input. And if you've ever fasted, you get into this space of hunger when you're so hungry that there's a deafness inside of you. Like if you see a child who's super hungry, or if you yourself have been hangry, like everything, all your common sense just goes out the window, right? Because you're overwhelmed by this need to consume something. But if you give it a day, or if you give it a two, then actually that hunger subsides and you get into this space of like simplicity and clarity. And you actually begin to actually hear a lot of things that you were deaf to in your pursuit of consuming, in your pursuit of grasping, in your in your pursuit of attaining that breakthrough that you're talking about. So when you feel the deafness of overwhelm in your life, when you feel that you can't hear your heart, like that is a time to fast. Whether it's from food or whether it's from screens or whether it's from emails, and everything, even if it's 5 minutes or 5 days or, of Vipassana, whatever it may be for you, how do you just sit and listen and just not try to hear anything in particular, but just open your sensory field and just allow things to just process and take their own time, their own space? Because the deluge will end, right? And there will be a clear sky again. And all that water will seep into the soil and then new life will grow. That's just the process.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many gems in what you've said. And there's like how the deafness, like the excess in certain spaces that's caused by the deafness. Coming back to the growing a plant analogy, if you just go and you turn on the hose at full blast and blast it into the soil, you're going to drown the plant. Right. That's breakdown, or if you totally strip the soil from all of its nutrients and you don't work in any sort of compost or minerals into the soil to provide the right base for the plant to grow strong and healthy. Think in your personal life, like not getting enough sleep, not eating, right, clean foods for yourself, like the simple stuff. It's like the plant is not going to grow. It's going to be brittle or it's going to grow too small. And so coming back to that space of where am I deaf to what I really need in this moment, which maybe can be clouded by this big idea of I need this breakthrough. And that I think is the step that initiates the cycle and the loop of the trap. I need this breakthrough and I need this thing to come into my life, this person, this relationship, this experience, this car, whatever it is, to come into my life to grant me an experience that I believe that I need to have. And all the while you've completely turned yourself off to just what's here, right here. And you may find that if you actually take that space, you start to clean up that mess and give yourself some distance to that, and you come into listening into your heart, you may hear a different story around where that agitation and that worry is coming from, which is, hey, I don't feel strong in what I'm doing with myself in my life, or I feel like people might reject me for, just not performing in a certain way. And then it's like, that's where the the insights start to come. It's like, actually,
Mm-hmm.
that is the thing that needs the attention. That's the thing that needs the awareness. And I'm able to actually come into that space and tend to that space because I've started to give myself some distance from the noise to come in and listen to what's there. And then when you listen to that part of you, which is ultimately some younger part of you that
Right.
is
Exactly right.
scared or feeling self-doubt or shame or any hurt from some experience that may or may not have involved an early caretaker and the way that you did and didn't receive the love that you may have needed. And then listening to that space and hearing that story and being able to tend and nurture that garden
Right.
inside. And then that is actually tilling and watering and fertilizing the real soil that really matters. Because then when that part feels heard and that insight is connected between what was living inside of you that was creating this noise, this agitation that was trying to get you to say, hey, stop looking out there for your breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
Come inside and sit
Yep.
here with me. Sit here with me on the bench. I need a hug. I need someone to listen to me. I need support. And then it's like, that's all you've needed. And
Yeah.
so then when you've given that to yourself, it's like that it's almost in the way that I've experienced it, it's like a shockwave, poof, ripples through the quantum across everywhere else in your life.
Right.
And the pieces start to adjust. The actual breakthrough was created inside of you. And then your life mirrors that breakthrough back to
Right.
you. It's not
Right.
out there. It's in the space inside of you. I find that this key is a powerful key, this archetype toward the um, birthing quantum leaps in your life.
Mm.
And for those who are listening who know the gene keys and have looked at their chart, there's a position in the chart called your evolution. And it's a very pronounced position. It's the way by which your soul incarnated to evolve and learn through the tests that you're presented
Mm.
karmically throughout your life. And so I have this key, this archetype in that space. And the way that I've experienced my evolutionary process in my life has been where I kind of will be existing around in some sort of a plateau. And I got to go around and I need to explore and search around that plateau. And maybe on that plateau, there's something in me that is like craving for some sort of breakthrough to break out of that
Mm-hmm.
plateau. And then after I've gone around and I've swept that whole floor a few times and I finally come and I sit down in the middle and I
Right.
come into that space and listen in to that space inside, and that insight comes through this archetype, then it's like an elevator. It's like, brrr, we're going to go up 8 floors. And then
Yeah.
almost quote unquote overnight, I witness across my life, my relationships, all of the things. It's like all of these pieces start to lock in ways that I couldn't have even possibly orchestrated mentally to come into my life in the sequence that they do.
Right.
And that's
So,
that epiphany, that lightning bolt, that aha, the light is on. And now with that here, I'm no longer living in that space. I'm now living in a whole new octave of my life and how I navigate through the world.
so powerful. There's so many points that lit me up, Patrick, with that. And like one of them that I feel super important, especially with me and my own process, is when we come in and care for that inner child, that is hiding in corners and in closets and under the stairs. And in my own parenting, my son Ronan, when he was very small, did something very interesting, which is like really insightful, especially into this key and into the shadow of deafness. The first movie that he really loved and it's like watched over and over again was Cars. And there was a moment in that movie where they were out in a field cow tipping, and a bull, jumps out, and it's really, intense and scary for a young human. And when he would watch it, he wouldn't cover his eyes as like many people do. They cover the eyes of the children. He'd cover his ears because it was the sound that was so intense. It was the sound that was overwhelming. And so he would cover his ears, and that helped him negotiate this overwhelm of sensory input and this fear. So like this idea of tapping into where you're deaf is really tapping into where are you in your timeline, where there's still a little child who's either covering their ears or covering their eyes because there was some part of your past that was too much, right? So overwhelmed, so overstimulated that you had to hide. And, how many times do you see a little child who wants to hide, just close their eyes, right? Because if they can't see anybody, nobody can see them. And when you have these parts that are living still inside of you, where that trauma is still braided into the present moment of your experience, that creates a deafness. It's like almost you need an overwhelm around you because it's too scary to get back into that space, to sit down and to really be with that child that never had the parent or never had the adult grounded energy to hold them and say, it's okay. You can open your eyes. It's okay. You're safe. You can listen. You can open your ears. It's okay. It's safe. And to that quantum jumping that you're talking about and those breakthrough moments that echo forward and back, where you're really healing ancestral trauma and really influencing your future self. Like that type of breakthrough happens when we bring those inner parts of ourselves that are hidden and scared, who are deaf and blind, who don't want to feel anymore. When we bring them back into the light, right? And say the storm is over. You're okay. You can relax. Now you can open your eyes again. Now you can open your ears again, And it's
Wow.
like that type of breakthrough.
I feel that we just took the elevator, in this podcast, at this moment, because that I feel that we broke through a new plane in the depth that we're speaking of, and maybe people listening can feel that. I like, in the Gene Keys, there are what are called repressive and reactive expressions of the shadow. And for anybody who's picked up a book, if you haven't, highly recommend picking up a copy of the Gene Keys book. You can find it on Amazon or through the genekeys.com. Genekeys.com, not the Gene Keys. What I mean by repressive and reactive is when we turn that inwardly upon ourselves, the shadow inwardly upon ourselves. It's like we press that shadow into ourselves. And then reactive would be where we project it outward, externalize it upon others. And the repressive expression of deafness is worried or worry. And the reactive is noisy. And so for me, in considering that this key has been a key that's in a really prominent position for me in the language of the Gene Keys, this key is really the centerpiece. There's no archetype in the entire 64 hexagrams that more solidly and centrally details the mechanism by which my soul evolves. And what that means in human terms is the tests and the challenges that I'll experience in my life than this archetype for me. And so that worry spoke so deeply to me in how I've experienced deafness in my life. This overwhelming noise of worry of how are things going to play out? What's the next step going to be? And Richard speaks of in the Gene Keys, the dilemma of this key is the dilemma of not knowing. And he also speaks into the archetype of the fool. And he really beautifully, I just love his contemplation on this. He really beautifully speaks of, in one of the depictions of the tarot, the fool is depicted walking along a cliff's edge
Mm-hmm.
with a tiger biting his leg and his head tilted towards the
Yeah, looking
sky
up.
and
Yeah.
looking up in a dance. And you can look this up for a reference to see what I'm talking about here. And he speaks of that tiger that biting his leg is like that worry. And where in our lives do we allow that to push us around? And I resonated I felt more seen than anything that I've maybe ever heard in my life than hearing that line, because that worry for me in my life has tilted, literally like brought my entire posture into
Right.
this space of smallness and this looking down in this
Mm-hmm.
panic of, am I going to fall off this cliff? Is this thing going to push me over the edge? And it's felt like death for me to lean into this slow process of starting to open my chest and slowly tilt my head upwards toward the sky of infinite potential,
Right.
to receive that deluge, to receive
Right.
that epiphany, that breakthrough,
That download.
knowing all the while that this imminent, doom on the cliff's edge with this tiger biting your leg is there. And this real boldness, and of all of the keys, he also speaks into how this is one of the keys that really carries the frequency and the energy of the rebel.
Mm-hmm.
And I've felt that so much in my journey and my healing, my transformation, of like to dance anyways, to
Right.
to allow your heart to sing despite all of the material symbols that exist across the billboards and the social media feed and everything that wants to tell you you're going to go into catastrophic debt, your relationship's
Right.
going to fail, the world's going to
Yeah.
get blown up and nuked, the food chain is going to collapse, you're getting poisoned, all of this stuff. And it's like, can you fucking dance to the beat of your own drum and the love in your heart regardless? And can you make that your rebellion in the way that you move through life, and in cultivating that in yourself? It has to be real. It has to be authentic. It can't be fake. It can't be fake. And the only way that it's not fake is by you being so in touch with that, tending to that part inside of you that has been terrified and afraid of
Right.
all of those things.
Right.
But showing them it's okay to get back up on the bike and ride again.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm with you.
Right.
And we're going to navigate and surf the unknown together.
Yeah.
And in time that becomes less serious, and in my experience, in time it's become less serious, and it has become more like a dance. And in some ways, and I wrote a whole post about this, probably one of my deepest posts and most vulnerable posts that I've ever written, where it was like, I've spent my whole life trying to run away from the edge. Literally and proverbially, and different painful experiences for me throughout my life. I've spent my whole life trying to run away from the edge and find a sense of safety. But in actuality, I've found that my power exists right at the edge, and by surfing the edge.
Yep.
And once I started to feel that, not just mentally, but like just feel that in my body and trust that quiver inside, to lean into that, that has created so many quantum leaps for me in my life, in the way that I show up, in the way that people show up with me in my life.
Right.
And
So
so
beautiful,
there's
Patrick.
that's the fool. It's the archetype of the fool, really. And it'll take you through. There's a reason why the fool is the alpha and the omega.
It is a zero card. Yeah. Right. No, exactly. Thank you for bringing up the fool, because I love how you described it with the tiger biting at the heels. And in other depictions of the fool, it's a dog.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that progression from the tiger to the dog, and the dog, the programming partner for this hexagram is the pericardium, which is the dog, right?
Oh, wow.
And so how does that tiger of worry that is literally clawing at you become your best friend? become your companion, become your protector, who is not just like gnawing at you, but is barking and nipping at you so that you do pay attention to where you're going. And so much of that is so rich with the archetype around this hexagram, and the stomach resonates with the dragon. And the dragon is a powerful archetype within Taoist Chinese medicine, symbolism and just archetypal information. So the dragon goes with the mind, with the intellect. And literally it's the part of the yin yang cycle, which is the yang, which is the looking up, which is the day, is what you can see, but is also the illusion, is the Maya. And so if you think of the lake in the sky, the cloud heavy with rain, that can be the dragon that's flying above you. So you can see the dragon's belly, which is that dark, ominous, ready just to pour and to storm. Or the dragon can be flipped over and you can see its back, which is the scales, which is the sparkly, things of life that is like the fool's gold. And so it's the illusion that the mind can really create any reality that it wants to be in. And we can be in all these parallel realities at any time, whether it's fantastical or tragic or catastrophic or caught in the past or projected in the future. Like our mind can take us to all these parallel dimensions and realities. You know what I mean? And so again, it's that overwhelm of being able to look and to see and to be walking in life, looking up at the sky, looking at this dragon that is around us at all times. And what are you seeing? Are you seeing the underbelly of life? Are you seeing what can be dark and ominous and threatening? Or are you seeing the glittery gold of what could be perfect and sparkly and illuminating? Both can take you into these spaces, right, that aren't necessarily grounded in the present moment. And so like you said, surfing that edge of the cliff is so important, and listening to the tiger or listening to the dog that's nipping at your heels, but also staying true to your path. And sometimes staying true to your path means jumping off the cliff completely, right?
Yeah.
Taking that leap of faith where like you're jumping into a void, and that the fool is the zero. So that's the void space where a viral spark of creativity goes into the void space and literally anything can be created. And that's the parallel universes. That's the multiverse. That's where every possibility is happening at any time. And so it's really our conscious choice of what we want to see in our life. It comes into play. But the beautiful part of this is that the dragon is the east, is the rising sun. It's what's bringing clarity and sight. But it's yin partnering is the tiger, which is our felt sense of reality, which is the feminine. And so the rising sun and the yang gives clarity to what actually set yesterday, what you digested, what you ate, what you took from a conscious choice, put it in your mouth, and now it's in the bowels of your body. It's in your unconscious now. And that's actually creating your physical experience. And so where yin and yang is balanced and they each have equal value, another little deeper, subtler truth is that the yang always serves the yin. That the felt experience of our existence is then served by our ability to bring clarity and inspired action to that felt sense. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so when you look at Chinese depictions of the dragon, it's always chasing the pearl of wisdom. And so it's either in its claws or it's somewhere in the painting. And the dragon is twisted and turned and convoluted, either around waves or clouds or all different things. And it's chasing this pearl of wisdom and it's reaching out for its claws. And to me, that's our mind. That's always saying what you need is outside of you. What you need is over there. What you need is just around the corner. What you need is whether it's an apology from somebody or a raise or a new shirt or a new car. And it's that's that place where we see outside of ourselves what we consider to be our joy or our lake in the sky, right? Our heaven above us. And like on social media in particular, when you're seeing everybody just like in their joy, right? Oh, yeah. In their illusion. And you're like, I don't have that. I need to get this. I need to get this. I need to get this. But the truth truth of it is that the dragon needs to not search for the pearl of wisdom outside itself. It needs to swallow it, and it needs to go down and sink into its belly. And it needs to hold it in its stomach. And so it stops racing around and just focuses on its own felt experience of truth. And that's where the breakthrough comes from. That's where the epiphany comes.
I'm smiling so hard. I feel in some ways like in my own experience so exposed, because I'm like, the number of times that, you know, and even to this day, it still catches me where I'm like, oh, that's going to be the thing that will, like, X will get me to Y, you know, and I create that sort of experience for myself that is like my maddening, you know, little dog biting at my leg, and that, you know, can sink its teeth more deeply. Like, hey, go get that. You have to get that, and figure your way out to get that breakthrough. And as a recovering overworker, burnout, you know, individual, and, you know, valedictorian 4.0 GPAs type of individual, of the immense pressure that I put myself under throughout my whole life of getting the right answer, you know, and these like mini like breakthroughs of like, oh, I like passed, I got like a perfect score on that test, you know, and I got, you know, I had the right insights, you know, to perfectly, you know, get every step right. And that I built my whole sense of value around knowing, like that knowing is my, is my greatest, gift. And then to flip that upside down, where it was like, no, actually it's your unknowing. And so that journey that we were talking about of like tilting the head upwards away from all of these unresolved, you know, blanks in my life of, wait, you mean that I should just keep on going forward with a smile on my face, even though these things feel unresolved? And there's a delicate, and this is like a disclaimer, delicate balance in this space, because there is the way of doing the fool where it's totally avoidant, naive, blind,
foolish,
truly foolish,
right?
Because it's, and I have done that as well. Earlier on, when I started to almost do this, like this false rebel energy, like I'm better than those unresolved things in my life, and I am. And this was actually, you know, I'll just share this for, you know, the entertainment of the audience, but early on in my spiritual awakening journey, I leaned really deeply into that kind of egoic spiritual identity around like my infinite eternal nature, because I had a taste of that. And then it was like, well, because of that, debt isn't real, you know, all of these sorts of things that are very, you know, dangerous to lean so deeply in with that sort of naive, egoic type of constitution in your relationship with it, because that's that dark fool energy. That you're like, I am in rebellion to these things that are uncomfortable for me in my life. And so rather than actually doing the thing of sitting with the discomfort and leaning into that space of where am I deaf within myself to what I really need, I just replaced one noise with another noise. It was the noise of these problems in my life with the noise of this like brash, faux bold energy that was still terrified of the dog biting at his leg, but just wanted to pretend like it wasn't there, because he wanted to jump the elevator ride all the way to the stratosphere without actually doing the work to rise through those levels by tending to the, you know, the breakdown experience that was happening inside of him. And what happened to me was I broke down.
You're right. You fell off the cliff a couple
I
times.
fell off the cliff. And after I fell off the cliff a few times, it was like, maybe that's not working.
Exactly.
Maybe that's not like the fool. And, I love where we're at in this conversation, and even leaning into some of the foolishness and playfulness, because I've found so much more of my messaging that feels really true to me, and really feels like when my messaging feels like, something authentic and helpful is really coming through me, is where I'm speaking to the fool in all of us.
Yeah.
And if you look at the most epic myths and tales and hero and heroine stories that exist throughout time, there's always an element of the stumbling and the fool sort of dynamic of the protagonist and the actors literally stumbling into these things that they could not have ever planned or predicted mentally, but ended up becoming some of those moments that were the key moments that light everybody up with the passion of that story of, against all odds, they survived and conquered and vanquished. And I come back to sometimes like The Hobbit as a perfect example in some ways, because it was, and for those of you who, I'm not necessarily a huge Lord of the Rings fan, but I've seen the movies, and the Hobbit, of leaving the Shire and going out on this journey, the most unassuming sort of main protagonist character isn't the strongest, isn't the most mystical or wisest, or he's the smallest,
and has huge feet, then stumbles,
his
like
literally is clumsy, is like purposefully clumsy, and yet
and is hungry, and always is kind of pursuing his hunger and his compulsions, and
is terrified, and is just like, and experiences some of the comic, there's the comic relief energy throughout the entire film around, this guy who just doesn't get it and is slowing us down or is messing us up. And actually it's through his clumsiness that there's also a cunning gift that's there that ends up coming through, and against all odds ends up creating the pathway for success for everybody. That is,
and in particular with
for all of us in our lives.
Exactly.
That we are all on that journey. Look at Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, and just that journey. And I, maybe just like a pause moment for anybody listening to this, scan back across your life, all of the infinite number of moments that came together to create the you that's sitting here right now. And the things that are unresolved and the things that feel really good in your life, could you have planned all of those little steps? And so then it's like, but we put that pressure upon ourselves right now in this moment that, that all happened to work out, but this next thing is definitely going to be the thing that destroys me.
Right.
And we close the door to this deeper power within ourselves to actually lean into what we do not know, what we cannot know, what we purposefully are not meant to know until the moment that we're meant to know it.
Exactly right. I love that. And, the line that I've heard Alan Watts say is, the fool that persists in his folly becomes wise. So when you persist in your folly, and for me, that gives me a lot of acceptance and a lot of understanding, compassion for my past foolishness. You know what I mean? And I love a lot of the playfulness, especially when we're stepping into this spiritual path, and all of a sudden your spirituality is defined by your, wide rimmed hat or the crystals that you have or your tarot deck, all these externalized things. But as you persist on that path, your foolishness or the sense of innocence, so this kind of like childlike exuberance becomes to internalize, where you realize that the true crystal is inside of you. The true wisdom is inside of you, is your felt knowing. And I love the Hobbit, because what does the Hobbit do? It's this small, unassuming, clumsy, hungry character that then goes and defeats the dragon, right?
Right. Exactly.
And so the dragon archetype is there too. And oftentimes, what I've come to really respect and be humbled by is that when I have fallen off the cliff, I've fallen into this place of hurting, which is actually my inner child that hasn't been resolved, that hasn't been tended to. So when we fall off the cliff of life, we're actually falling into a part of our innocence that doesn't need to be shamed, doesn't need to be reprimanded, doesn't need to be punished. But actually in our fall, when we make that contact with hard ground and we actually come face to face with the reality, that's where we really have this opportunity to tend to what has been really hurting within us. You know what I mean? To really come and care for the parts of us that have been deaf, that have been blind, that have been overwhelmed. And it's really the falling, and like what you've said before, Patrick, is the getting back up, the falling and the getting back up, which when you look at somebody going through life and you see them fall over and over again, we call them a fool. Right. But in many ways, if they persist in that folly, if they allow themselves to fall over and over again, eventually you learn that the ground is hard, and so you learn not to fall off your horse. And then you learn to actually ride, and you learn to ride with skill, and you learn to ride with grace. And that's what this whole journey is about,
Falling over and over again and finding the courage to get back up, man. I mean, that feels like my, that's such a centerfold theme for, what I've navigated and continue to navigate through in my life. And, something was coming to me as you were sharing, and the point of the conversation that we're getting to here, where when you look at the state of the world, it doesn't look good out there. And increasingly, there's every headline that wants to tell you that death and destruction is here for everyone.
Imminent.
Is imminent. And there's, in the spirit of the rebellion energy that's connected with this archetype. And the disclaimer here is that this is not to deny anyone's pain or anything that they're going through and the very real, horrible things that exist and that people are suffering through every day across this planet. But there's such a cellular belief inside of me, everything is going to be okay.
For sure.
And when I say everything is going to be okay, it's neither the naive, blind to what's happening, everything's going to be okay, nor is it the everything's going to be okay, meaning everything for everyone is going to end up in this same equal outcome of just like, just like everybody's going to land right at this spot. It is an acknowledgement that everybody is going through everything that their soul is destined to go through. And somebody is Chewbacca and another person is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and everybody
and another person's Jabba the Hutt.
Another person's Jabba the Hutt.
Right.
And that's what makes, thank you. That's what makes it what it is. And that in that there's this kind of poetic beauty of everybody's serving the role that they are meant to serve in this life, and there's no better than or less than. And um, in all of that, that it's just what it is. It's just the way that it is meant to go for the story of the human race and where
Right.
we're evolving to as a species.
Right.
And so I've found more and more that there's this settledness in the depth of my heart around that unknown. Like, I don't know where my story is going to take me. I don't know when my story, my chapter, my lines in the script come to an end.
Mm-hmm.
Abruptly or unexpectedly, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that, none of us know that. The grand unknowing is no one knows when death is going to knock at your door. Right. And that lives inside every single one of us. And we can look at certain conditions and spaces that seem more prone to that versus others, and that can be real. And by overemphasizing certainty in connection with certain factors as predictions toward those ends, you close the door to the epiphany. You close the door to God coming through. You close the door to the miracle from showing up. And so more and more I've just found in my own journey that it comes back to what we're talking about really in the heart and meat of this conversation is, where can you tend to that space inside of you that's calling for your attention with its worry and with its noise, and sit down and listen to what it has to say. And when you start to tend to that more and more, can you take that part of you on an epic journey of moving through life with a little bit more of that playful fool energy that says we all are just floating on a rock through space, figuring it out moment to moment as we go. And none of us can predict what the next moment is here to bring us. And so in that, can we find the celebration and the peace in just in the present here, right? And the sun or the rain or the texture or the breath or the sensation of whatever is there right there in that moment. And that is everything.
Yeah. Such a beautiful space to actually wrap up, because we're over our hour mark. And but what you're speaking to, Patrick, really is this ability to trust life, this ability to trust, your falls, your greatest failures, the time that you tripped and you stumbled and you scraped your knee, or you fell on your hands, or you broke a bone, or, you had these ego deaths, felt like you lost everything. And to really trust life is moving us through time and space and moving us on this cliff's edge where we get to truly choose whether we paralyze ourselves in worry and fear, or we unshackle ourselves and continue to dance, even if when we're dancing on the cliff's edge. Yeah. And to really trust in the unity of life and the fact that we all are of the same quintessence. We are all of the same true energy. And that really, we're not here to just hoard. We're not here to be the dragon to fill our caves with gold. We're actually here to learn how to love and how to share our love in the unique way that only we can, inhabiting this particular genomic expression of life. And so how do we just love with abandon, but love with wisdom? So we're not just throwing ourselves off a cliff, but we're actually dancing on the cliff's edge with so much trust that life will hold us, and life will hold us in a balanced way that will get what we'll need and will also give to others what they need, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's so beautiful. I'd say, just wrapping up with everybody and summarizing here, really exploring in your lives, as an invitation here, exploring your life. What's a breakthrough that you're praying for or have been praying for? And excuse me, wherever that breakthrough is kind of pulling you and nipping at your leg, and just the mental idea of that breakthrough is seems to be pushing you around. And can you find the space in your life to sit and tune in and listen in to the underlying worry that may be driving you around in craving and hungering for that breakthrough? And can you listen and tend to that part of yourself and ask that part of yourself,
Yeah.
what does that need? And give that to yourself. And that in that is watering that seed inside of you, that is fertilizing the space inside of you for that breakthrough to happen within. And as that happens, that will ripple across your life, and all of the pieces will come together in a mystically perfect way that you couldn't have possibly have mentally designed by going out there and trying to put it all together in that way. So it's really, this archetype is an invitation to come back in, to listen clearly around that energy that is driving you out towards that craving of a breakthrough, and tending to it and tilling the soil. And how can I create the conditions in my life for a breakthrough to emerge? Not how do I achieve the breakthrough, but how do I create the space in my life for a breakthrough to come in? How do I roll out the red carpet and clean my inner temple so that God can show up and bring the feast for me?
Beautifully said. Great way to end. Thank you.
And so thank you all so much for hanging with us this week. Sean, thank you so much for just another epic conversation. It's truly such a
Thank you,
blessing
Patrick.
to sit with you every week and
Always.
do this. For everybody listening, we'll be back again next week, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern. We don't know, in the spirit of this hexagram, we don't know which hexagram we're going to be speaking about next week, but trust that epiphany will come when the time comes, and we'll see you again for another conversation, and take care.